Welcome, I'm the Deadwoodjedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video, kind of continuing the Faction War series. The Sylvan faction hasn't opened yet, but I figured probably a good time to go ahead and do a preview of that. Now, I don't know when this video is going out. The faction might already be open. This might be super late, but I still feel like the information here is going to be valuable for you. Even if we don't know the specifics of which bosses we're facing, what waves we're facing, there's a lot of stuff in here that we can still anticipate and start to prepare for and build up in our own factions. Now, to start off, obviously, if you have any legendaries, they're going to be good. Use them. I think that's always just like a simple, easy way to go with that. But we're going to be approaching this as if you don't have any of the legendaries, you have access to all or at least most of the epics and all the rare champions. So if you don't, obviously, that's just a natural issue, right? You're limited by the champions you have. But at some point, you're going to be getting these champions. So we want to anticipate which ones are the ones we're going to look out for, which are the ones we're going to want to bring in and fill the roles that we need. If you enjoyed today's video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss the next one. So the first thing you'll see is Sylvan Watchers doesn't have a ton of champions. It's brand new. And I anticipate when they open this faction, we're going to get a bunch of new ones to come in. Probably a fair amount of rare champions to help fill this out, maybe a couple extra epics as well. What I will say is that with the epics we have, all the roles that we need filled are available. Maybe not to the extent that we want right away, but they are at least there. So let's go through and kind of talk about, what are we looking to bring in? What is going to be available for us? Now, first off, right, if you have somebody like Elva, you're going to be in really good shape, and a lot of people should already have her, but if you don't, that's obviously going to make this a lot tougher for you. So we're going to need to anticipate that. Now, one of the things that we need to understand when we're doing faction wars, there's generally three things we need to bring in, right? With an optional fourth, depending on the team we have. But three things: we need crowd control, we need damage, and we need survivability, right? That's pretty basic for everything. But crowd control for faction wars is especially important, mainly because our champions aren't as good. They're using our B tier gear or C tier gear. And a lot of these champions aren't being used anywhere else in the game. So, making sure that we can stop the enemy before they hit us is going to be really important. So obviously you can use things like stun sets to kind of get through that. Sleep sets, provoke sets, those are all going to be really valuable for you. But there are some champions in this faction that are going to be useful for that in two primary ways, right? When you're CCing the enemy, you can either completely lock them down. That's what a stun comes in, a freeze, even a provoke can be used in that way. And then there's turn meter manipulation as a way to lock people down. And this faction does have a lot of people with decreased speed available to them. So that's definitely something you're going to want to look at. Decreased speed and increased speed. That combination can make your team take a lot more turns than the enemy. And that is kind of a form of crowd control. Somebody like Cormac here, he's got decreased speed on that A1, and I think he's got decreased defense. Yeah, he's got decreased speed on that A1. That's a possibility. Kellen has decreased speed on that A2 there, right? And turn meter decrease. Lockwayne here, I think has, what does he have? He doesn't have anything. Not somebody we need to learn at. Obviously, some of these are still new for me. Creodan the Blue. Now, this is somebody that if you have him, I think you're going to 100% want to bring him in. He brings freeze, right? Triple attack on one enemy, AoE freeze here, and increased speed and turn meter. Absolutely love this. Plus turn meter boost for himself. Definitely a champion I'm going to want to be bringing in on this fight. I think, does Enda have that? No, it's got Leech here. So that's always good for some healing options. Wiranon is offensive base. Ruella has obviously decreased speed within her kit. Single target, so not the greatest, but it is available. Daihi, I believe, also has, does he have decreased speed? No, he has decreased defense. There you go. Okay, so not a lot of options, like I said, but there's at least some there. The other thing is we were talking about damage. The good thing is this faction has a lot of good damage dealers. Nobody extremely good, no like outstanding people, but champions like Mistrider Daihi is a really good champion. Plus he gets a lot of extra turns. Somebody like Ruella can do a lot of damage as well with a huge turn meter boost for your entire team. So those are a couple champions that I would definitely be looking at. Kellen the Shrike. A lot of offensive champions in this faction makes it a lot easier to get through the damage part. A couple champions that offer, decreased defense as well. Daihi would be my preferred choice if I had to choose. So like for me right now, I'd be going, Creodan, Daihi for sure. Those would be two champions I'd want to bring in. I think Duodan is going to be as important as any champion available for you to bring in as well. He has a ability to cleanse on that A1. It is a really nice skill, right? Really nice, especially because not only does he give a shield for everybody, right? And extend the duration of buffs, but he also gives himself counterattack and strengthen, and he has a taunt abilities, right? So there's a lot of stuff to like about him that can help control the crowd with that taunt buff, but also the counterattack and the 50-50 shot of cleansing on his A1 makes him a really good option. I would love to put him in like a Guardian set. I think that's absolutely the way I would go with a champion like that. And so that would be a really great option there as a champion. Another support champion, White Dryad Nia, obviously has that ally protection strengthen buff. Those are amazingly good. The big heal, not to mention the healing from her passive, are phenomenal. So 100% she's another champion that I would be bringing in either in a Guardian set, bolster set, some kind of healing set like regen would always be a really good option for someone like her. So if I had Nia, if I had Duodan, those 100% would be champions I'd bring in, along with Daithi and Creodan. And then I have some options, right? I could bring in somebody like Enda. Not my favorite champion, has decreased defense, but has a leech. If I'm struggling for healing, especially if I don't have Nia or I'm not putting healing sets on everybody, that might be a really, really good option. If my team's super squish, this is that fourth option, that reviver role. Wiranon is a really good choice for that, and definitely somebody I would be using for that. I think Ornn has some really good options here. This would be for more of a long-term team, utilizing the poisons, the activation. It's not going to be a fast run, but if you can survive in the meantime, definitely someone I would look at. And then one other thing I wanted to point out, and I think it's Lockwayne here. If there are Valkyrie waves with those massive shields, Lockwayne is going to be really, really valuable because he can ignore shield buffs. And if he kills someone, resets the cooldown of the skill. So if you can build him really strong to knock down those Valkyries one after another, that can be a really powerful approach here. And that's definitely somebody I would be looking at pretty heavily. He also has a chance, I think, to remove buffs and steal buffs, right? So definitely some stuff in there that I would be looking at as far as people to bring in. Now, those are the epics, right? I think all of them, every single one of them, there's no bad ones. I think they all have some kind of usage, even if it's not like spectacular. They have a place to be used here. And so it's going to be a lot about the gear sets you'd use, the way you build them, and the team structure itself. One of the hardest things is going to be healing, right? I think that's just going to be the biggest issue with this faction, because there's not a lot of healing, right? You have the revive from Wiranon. That's definitely a thing, right? But there's no healing in that. And then you have White Dryad Nia. So outside of those two, there's not a lot of healing at all in the epic side of things. That's a problem. That's definitely an issue. So you can obviously counter that by utilizing immortal gear, guardian gear, bolster gear, regeneration gear, stuff that gives you more HP as you go along. Those would be ways I would be looking at to kind of fill out my team and make me survive. Now, there are a couple epics here that are interesting. Now, Kite, I think, is terrible. The only thing she brings is a block buffs on the A1. Only one in this faction that I see that does that. So at least in the epic or rare category. So that might be a niche usage for certain bosses. Outside of that, I probably wouldn't want to use her. Margrave Greenhawk, I do think has some potential here. Now, let's go through and figure out why. Continuous heal on the A1, pretty solid. HP-based champion, too, with a solid base. You can build that up pretty high. Provoke on that A2, that's an AoE provoke, not too bad. Reflect damage is a pretty solid buff to put on as well. And then ally protection, even if it's a smaller version, it's still a way to kind of mitigate some of the damage your other champions are taking with an increased defense on himself, even that's a small version. So I believe Margrave Greenhawk can be used as that kind of ally protector, that sustained person for your team. Not going to be spectacular at it, but definitely has the ability to do that for you. And so if you don't have a White Dryad Nia, that might be an option, or you don't have Guardian gear, that might be an option of a champion you want to bring in. You're going to have to be careful, though, because, if he's taking all the hits, who's healing him? That becomes one of the issues with this faction. So that is definitely something you're going to want to be careful with, but I think is definitely a solid option. I actually like Margrave out of all the rares. She's my favorite out of them. Now, Tierlac, I know a lot of people really like this champion. I've never been a huge fan of him. Part of the reason why, there are some great things about his kit, but part of the reason why is his base stats are just really low, right? Defense is okay, but the HP is very low. Kind of hard to keep a person alive like that, especially as a rare champion. But the advantage is decrease attack, even if it's a weak one on that A1, increase speed, even if it's a weak one, is an AoE on that A2. And then, of course, an AoE shield on the A3. The shield isn't going to be great. With only 15,000 HP, it's really hard to build that up high enough. He's a defensive based champ. So are you sacrificing defense and his damage for the shield? And, you know, with some more HP, that's a balance you're going to have to strike. I don't particularly love it, but if you don't have another champion that gives you increased speed, I think he can be really useful. And even a small shield is still valuable, right? The passive is nice as it decreases some of the damage he takes. That helps. But generally, not my favorite champion. Definitely somebody that I would be hesitant, I suppose, to really bring in and utilize, right? So for me, I like Margrave. I think that's a very solid sustain option for your team. And that's another champion that I would swap in. But if I had to choose, if I had all these champions available and I had to choose, I would definitely go with White Dryad Nia. I would go with Duodan, Mistwriter Daihi for the AoE decreased defense. I think that's really, really nice and essential there. And I feel like he's got what, buff removal on the A1. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. Plus all the extra turns makes him a real easy champion to bring in. I would probably opt for Creodan, absolutely. Having that, the freeze is so really valuable. I think that's an absolutely kind of essential thing to bring in, to be honest with you. And then I might actually opt for somebody like Enda. With the leech being out there, it does offer a way to at least heal for my team. Another decreased defense on the A1 is not a bad balance there, right? So that's not a bad choice to bring in. One thing I would like is like a decreased attack, maybe a decreased speed. So someone like Kellen might be a really good option there as well. He's definitely a solid choice there. I don't really love Cormac. I don't think he's good with a lot of single target stuff. Not somebody I'd be looking for. Ruella might be interesting. But again, a little squish. I'm not sure that this is exactly what I want, but she has a lot of attacks, can definitely do some good damage. So that's another option. There is no decreased attack in here. I don't know if you guys noticed it. I definitely did. That's something that's missing. Actual healing is something that's missing. And so in a non-void, ally protection option is really missing. So there's definitely some things that are missing from the epics that I would want to have. Those are some things that are offered here in the rares, right? You have decreased attack, even if it's a weak one from Turlak. You have ally protection from Margrave. So there is some argument to bring those champions in for your team if you're missing some champions. But for me, I'd probably bring in Nia, Enda, Duodan, Daihi, and Creodan, and allow my champions to heal based off their damage. So that would be my approach to this. But in general, I think that this shouldn't be a super challenging faction for us. Part of the reason is all these champions are good. Like there's none of these that are, completely trash champions. They all have value. As far as advancing, I even think that you can probably get away getting through a lot of this just with Ornn, quite frankly. As he has like that self-healing ability and the poisons, it'll be slow, but he'll be able to get you through a lot of the content on his own. And there's some really unique options here. Not to mention, all the legendaries kind of offer a little something else, like a little something different that I think is really good. So if you happen to get one of them, you're going to be in real good shape as far as, completing this faction goes. Now, it's not great. It's not going to be super easy, right? The fact there's only one reviver isn't great. Outside of Alva, that definitely makes it a bit more of a challenge. And early on, it's probably going to be a challenge for a lot of people. But, as always, the longer you play, the more champions collect, the easier this kind of stuff gets to be. So anyway, that's my advice. That's my, tips. I don't know, the way I would look at approaching this faction here and the way I would deal with it. Now, obviously, if you're looking for, specific bosses, if this comes out after the faction's release, or if I haven't done a follow-up video once the faction's released, you can check out all my other faction war videos, and that's going to give you a pretty good sense of, the different bosses, because those kind of repeat, and how to go about approaching them, how to take them down, and use the same tips just with the champions that we have available here to deal with that. I think that would be, definitely something I would be looking to do. But hopefully we'll get some more champions in this faction that makes this a lot more attainable for us and a lot easier to kind of push through. So anyway, guys, hopefully that was informative, enjoyable for you guys. A little bit of education while I'm on vacay. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next we meet, on the Deadwood Jedi.